Richard had been gone for 3 weeks when the divorce papers showed up. No warning. No conversation. Just a thick envelope on a Tuesday morning, sitting on the table where Claire used to leave his coffee. By then, he had already told her exactly what he thought of the house. Too old, too expensive, too much work, and, in his words, not worth saving. Claire had heard him say it more than once. He said the place had become a burden. He said it tied them to a life he had already outgrown. He said no sensible person would keep pouring money into a 5-bedroom colonial that needed repairs every other month. What he did not say was that he had already started building another life somewhere else. That same morning, the bank sent a past due notice on their home equity line. Claire opened the statement, expecting to find a missed payment. Instead, she found a transfer for $86,400. Not withdrawn in cash. Not paid to a contractor. Transferred. The memo line read, Lakeview Unit Deposit. The money had gone to a company called RMC Property Holdings, LLC. Claire had never heard of it. She read the line again. Then a third time. A few minutes later, Richard texted her. Don't turn this into a war. You can't afford to keep the house anyway. Claire stared at the screen. She did not call him. She did not ask who Vanessa was. She did not ask why marital money had been moved into a company she knew nothing about. She printed the statement, because Richard was wrong about one thing. The house was not empty. It was full of evidence, and if you have ever watched someone mistake silence for weakness, subscribe. Some people go quiet because they have given up. Others go quiet because they have finally started paying attention. 24 years earlier, Claire Bennett had been the one with the steady job. She worked as a bookkeeper for a small construction company outside Columbus. The office was plain. Fluorescent lights, metal filing cabinets, coffee that had been sitting too long. The work was not glamorous, but Claire was good at it. She liked order. She liked numbers that added up. Numbers did not flatter you. They did not make promises. They did not change their story when the room got uncomfortable. Richard had been different back then. He was bright, ambitious, and angry about how often he was overlooked. He wanted a management position, but every interview seemed to end the same way. Someone with more education got the job. Someone with better connections moved ahead. Richard would come home frustrated, loosen his tie, and tell Claire that he was capable of more. She believed him. That was the beginning of everything. When Claire's father died, he left her $42,000. It was not a fortune. It was the only inheritance she ever received. Richard needed tuition for an MBA program. Claire used nearly all of the money to pay for it. She told herself it was not really giving something up. It was investing in their future. One sacrifice now, and later they would both benefit. At night, she took extra bookkeeping jobs at the kitchen table. She waited until the house was quiet, opened her ledger, and worked while Richard studied. She postponed her own accounting certification because they could not afford 2 people chasing bigger careers at the same time. When Emily was born, Claire stayed home more often. Richard traveled. Claire handled the doctor visits, school forms, groceries, dental appointments, parent conferences, and all the small emergencies that never appeared in anyone's professional biography. Years later, when Richard had a chance to invest in his first real estate project, he came to Claire again. He wanted to borrow against the house. Claire hesitated. The house was the one thing that felt solid. It was an aging colonial with 5 bedrooms, a deep attic, wide windows, and worn wooden floors that creaked in familiar places. There was also a small suite behind the kitchen. Claire loved that part most. She and Richard used to talk about fixing it up after retirement. Maybe they would turn the extra rooms into a quiet guest house. Nothing grand. Just a place for people who needed somewhere warm and peaceful to stay. Back then, it sounded like a dream they shared. So Claire signed the loan papers. Richard got his investment. His career began to rise, and slowly, almost too slowly to notice, the house he once planned to grow old in began to embarrass him. He called it outdated. He complained about the roof, the pipes, the paint, and the heating bills. He said successful people did not live in places that looked tired. Claire was not perfect in any of this. That mattered. She avoided money arguments because conflict made her uncomfortable. She let Richard manage more of the accounts because he said it was simpler for work. When his explanations became sharp, she stopped asking follow-up questions. Part of her knew she was stepping back too far. But after so many years of helping him move forward, questioning him felt like questioning every sacrifice she had already made. So while Claire built a family, Richard built an image. Tailored suits, executive dinners, a golf membership, conferences in other cities, weekend business trips that always sounded urgent. Claire told herself that was the cost of success. She told herself marriage required trust. Even when that trust began asking her not to look too closely. By then, Richard's success had become the story of the family. Everyone knew how hard he worked. Very few people knew who had made that work possible. That was the mistake Claire would understand later. She had not simply stopped checking accounts. She had stopped protecting her place inside the life she had helped build. The changes came gradually. That made them easier to excuse. Richard changed the password on his work computer. When Claire asked about it, he said the company had tightened security. A few months later, he moved his annual bonus out of their joint account. Claire noticed. Richard gave her a thin smile. "You don't understand corporate finance. Let me handle it." He started staying overnight near the office. Sometimes it was a late meeting. Sometimes a client dinner. Sometimes bad weather that somehow seemed to exist only on his side of town. Then he began looking at Claire differently. Not like a wife. More like a problem he had outgrown. Her clothes looked old. Her hair needed attention. She had gotten too comfortable. The house made him feel poor. Her bookkeeping clients did not count as a real career. She had no ambition. Claire heard all of it. And like many people who have spent years holding a family together, she tried to fix herself before questioning the person tearing it apart. Then Vanessa Cole began appearing in Richard's stories. Vanessa understood pressure. Vanessa knew how executives thought. Vanessa handled difficult clients. Vanessa never complained when plans changed. Her name came up too often. Claire finally asked why one coworker seemed to be part of every conversation. Richard looked offended. "She understands what my job takes. That's all." Then came the charges. Restaurants Claire had never visited, a furniture store across town, parking fees near Lakeview. When she asked about them, Richard said she was becoming suspicious. Then he used another word. Unstable. Claire never forgot that word. He used it again after missing Emily's parent conference. Claire had reminded him twice. She sat alone with the teacher while Richard ignored 3 calls. That evening, he came home irritated and told her he had been working to pay for the life she enjoyed. The cruelty of it was almost elegant. Claire was still doing bookkeeping from home. She managed the mortgage, utilities, school forms, repairs, meals, appointments, and nearly every detail of Emily's life. Richard's income had grown. His presence had shrunk. Then his story about Claire began changing in front of other people. He told relatives she contributed very little. He said she was too emotional about the house. He said Emily needed a modern environment and a parent who understood the real world. He joked that Claire could barely manage one aging property, much less life on her own. At first, it did not sound like a man planning a divorce. It sounded like a man explaining away his disappointment. But that was not what he was doing. He was preparing an argument. Richard was not just hiding an affair. He was quietly building a version of Claire that a judge, a relative, or even their daughter might someday believe. The first break in that story came from Emily. One evening, She casually mentioned that her father had shown her a condo. A nice one. Modern kitchen. New floors. A bedroom already chosen for her. Claire kept her voice steady. Richard had told her he was staying in a hotel. She did not question Emily like a witness. She did not ask whether Vanessa had been there. She simply wrote down the date, the time, and the Lakeview address. Emily remembered. Claire still did not know who was living in that condo. 3 days later, the bank began answering that question. She started with the accounts she was legally allowed to access. The home equity statements came first. The $86,400 transfer was only the beginning. There were legal fees she did not recognize, payments to a furniture showroom near Lakeview, monthly condo management charges. Smaller transfers routed through RMC Property Holdings, LLC, then shifted out of view. Claire searched the state's public business registry. The company had been formed 11 months earlier. Its registered agent was Vanessa Cole. Claire Affair was no longer a fear. The financial betrayal was no longer a feeling. It was written down. But one LLC and one condo did not tell her how much Richard had hidden, how long he had been hiding it, or what else he had moved before filing for divorce. Claire picked up her phone. She wrote a message accusing him of stealing from their marriage. She mentioned Vanessa, the condo, the home equity line. She read it twice. Then she deleted it. Anger would warn him. Silence might preserve the trail. So Claire began collecting what she could lawfully collect. She downloaded statements. She printed copies. She stored one set away from the house. She made a timeline of Richard's trips, missed weekends, unexplained charges, and nights away. Then she started a parenting calendar. School drop-offs, medical appointments, dental visits, teacher meetings, canceled weekends. Every time Richard said work mattered more, she photographed the condition of the house. She recorded balances. She listed every bill she had kept paying after he left. None of it felt dramatic. It felt boring, slow, almost painfully ordinary. That was exactly why it mattered. Richard had created confusion. Claire answered with dates. He relied on confidence. She answered with documents. 2 days later, he called. His voice was calm, almost kind. He said he wanted a peaceful divorce. Claire could leave the house, and he would help her rent something smaller. They could divide custody equally. No one would need to pay child support. In exchange, Claire would agree not to request deeper discovery into his business interests, bonuses, or company records. Richard called it a clean break. Claire understood what it really was. A deal designed to keep her uninformed. She did not argue. She did not mention Vanessa. She did not mention the LLC. She only said, "Send it to me in writing." Richard heard, "Surrender." Claire heard the first useful statement he had made in months. She now had an LLC, an address, and proof that marital money had been moved. But Denise Harper would want to know what Richard had hidden beyond the condo. Denise was 61, sharp-eyed, and not easily impressed. She listened while Claire explained the marriage, the money, the condo, the custody proposal, and the quiet campaign Richard had begun against her. Then Denise closed the folder. "We don't need to prove he was a bad husband. We need to prove where the money went, who actually cared for Emily, and what his real income is." That sentence changed the way Claire saw the case. Pain had its place, but pain was not evidence. Denise explained that, in their state, financial records, parenting history, and credibility could affect property division, child support, attorney fees, and custody. The first step was discovery. Richard produced documents slowly. Some were incomplete. Others created more questions than answers. His year-end bonus had been routed through RMC Property Holdings. The LLC paid expenses on the condo. Part of the purchase came from the home equity line secured by the family house. There were company-paid trips involving Vanessa. consulting payments with no clear description of what she had done. Richard's child support proposal relied on a salary figure that ignored bonuses, commissions, and business benefits. Then a $70,000 debt to his mother appeared on his disclosure. No signed loan agreement. No payment history. No bank record showing she had ever loaned him the money. Denise hired a forensic accountant. He found something even more deliberate. Richard had delayed a large commission until after the date he expected the divorce to be settled. The money had been earned during the marriage. He had simply tried to move the moment when it became visible. Then came the custody filing. Richard asked for equal parenting time and described it as his chance to become a more involved father. Claire did not attack him. She did not tell Emily what to say. She gave Denise records, school schedules, medical files, dentist appointments, teacher emails, activity calendars, 3 years of parenting notes, messages showing Richard canceled weekends, travel records proving he had been out of town during many of the weeks he now claimed he had been available. Claire did not want to erase Richard from Emily's life. She wanted to stop him from rewriting the life they had already lived. When Denise calculated child support using Richard's likely real income, he changed tactics. Through his attorney, he raised the question of paternity. He claimed Claire had once been close to another man before they married, and said he wanted certainty. The timing said more than the request. He had waited 15 years to question whether Emily was his daughter. Then child support entered the conversation. Claire agreed to the test through counsel. She refused to let Emily hear the accusation from either parent. The result confirmed Richard was her father. No screaming, no public humiliation, just a lab report showing how far he was willing to go once responsibility came with a dollar amount attached. While the legal case moved forward, Claire faced a simpler problem. She needed money. The house had 5 bedrooms, an attic, and the unused suite behind the kitchen. Richard had called it a burden. Claire remembered what they once planned to do with it, only now she would do it without him. She repaired the suite using documented personal savings. She kept every invoice, every receipt, every transfer. Then she legally formed Harbor House Living. Claire did not chase weekend tourists. She offered furnished midterm housing to traveling nurses, contract medical workers, and older women between homes after divorce. Denise warned her to keep the business clean. No mixing accounts, no cash arrangements, no missing paperwork. Claire opened a separate bank account. She used written leases. She reported every payment. She kept every record ready for discovery. A clean paper trail would protect Harbor House. It would also protect Claire when Richard eventually accused her of hiding money. Her first tenant was a respiratory therapist on a 12-week hospital contract. Claire cleaned the suite herself. She handled the lease. She tracked every expense with the same care she had once given Richard's career. The first month covered utilities. The second helped with property taxes. Then a hospital housing coordinator called. A second tenant took an upstairs room. Claire added a small desk, stronger locks, and a quiet coffee station. She listened to feedback. She adjusted the rent carefully. The house did not become a fortune overnight. It became useful. For the first time since Richard left, the mortgage no longer felt like a clock counting down toward disaster. Harbor House Living began helping the house pay for itself. Claire was not rich. Not yet. But she had something Richard never expected her to build. Momentum. That momentum changed Claire's days before it changed her bank account. She began living 2 lives. During the day, she prepared rooms, balanced books, drove Emily to school, welcomed new tenants, and met contractors at the house. She learned which repairs could wait and which ones could not. She learned that an honest answer was better than an impressive promise. She learned that most people did not need luxury. They needed a clean room, a working lock, a quiet night, a place where they did not feel watched or judged. At night, the house changed. The guests went to sleep. Emily finished her homework. And Claire sat beneath the same kitchen light where she had once done Richard's bookkeeping. Only now she was organizing evidence. She answered Denise's emails, She updated the parenting calendar. She compared Richard's financial disclosures with old tax returns, joint statements, and business records. Whenever a number did not match, she mocked it. Whenever a date looked too convenient, she wrote it down. There was nothing glamorous about it. Most real turning points are not glamorous. They are made of folders, receipts, unanswered questions, and the discipline to keep going when nobody is clapping. Harbor House living continued to grow. Claire did not wake up one morning and discover she was wealthy. She still cleaned bathrooms. She still folded sheets. She still stood in the basement, listening to the furnace, and wondering whether the next repair would wipe out a month of profit. She counted every dollar before approving a contractor's estimate, but the mortgage was being paid. That mattered. A retired neighbor named Linda began helping with laundry and room preparation a few mornings each week. Claire paid her properly. She tracked the hours. She issued receipts. She was not going to build her freedom on the kind of careless records Richard had always assumed she would keep. Then the local hospital added Harbor House to its referral list for contract nurses. 1 booking became 3. 3 became a waiting list. A woman going through a separation stayed for 6 weeks while she waited for an apartment. A traveling nurse extended her lease because, as she put it, Harbor House was the first place in months where she could sleep without hearing traffic or an argument through the wall. The house Richard had called too old to save was now supporting itself. It was creating work. It was giving women a place to land. And little by little, it was restoring Claire's belief that she could build something that did not require Richard's approval. Then Denise called. Her voice was calm, but Claire could hear the difference. The forensic accountant had found more. RMC Property Holdings did not just hold the Lakeview condo. The LLC also had financial interests in 2 real estate projects Richard had described in Discovery as unfinished and nearly worthless. They were neither. One project had already received preliminary financing. The other had a signed development option that could become extremely valuable once zoning approval came through. Richard had moved money and ownership rights into the LLC before filing for divorce. On paper, his personal assets appeared smaller. His income looked lower. His liabilities looked heavier. The arrangement had one purpose: to make the marital estate appear weaker than it really was. Then there were the payments to Vanessa. RMC Property Holdings had paid her consulting fees over several months. The invoices looked official. The problem was that there were no consulting reports, no signed agreement, no meeting notes, no work product. No evidence she had done anything that justified the payments. The money had moved. The work had not. Claire sat at the kitchen table while Denise explained it. For months, Claire had been trying to understand whether Richard had hidden one affair and one condo. Now she knew the condo was only the front door. Behind it was an entire system designed to move money out of sight. 3 days later, Richard showed up at the house. He had not called. He had not texted. Claire saw his car from the front window. He stayed in the driveway longer than necessary, looking at the other vehicles parked outside, the new exterior lights, and the small Harbor House living sign beside the steps. The sign was tasteful, nothing flashy, but it told him what he needed to know. The house was working without him. Claire stepped outside and closed the door behind her. Richard did not ask about Emily. He did not ask whether Claire was managing. He did not apologize for the money, the affair, or the DNA request. He looked past her toward the house. This is still marital property. Half of whatever you built here belongs to me. Claire had expected anger. The entitlement felt worse. Richard told her there was still time to settle privately. He wanted access to the Harbor House business account. He wanted her to stop the forensic review. He wanted her to sign a settlement before the next hearing. Then he made what he clearly believed was a generous offer. He said they could expand together, buy more properties, create a larger operation. He had contacts, investors, experience. Richard spoke as though he had returned to rescue Claire from a business she had created in his absence, as though her success had become legitimate only after he noticed it. Claire let him finish. She had learned something useful during the divorce. People like Richard often revealed the most when they believed the other person was still waiting for their approval. You didn't come back because you missed the house. You came back because it started making money you couldn't control. The softness left his face. He told her he would inform the court that she was hiding income. He said she was profiting from marital property without his permission. He said no judge would look kindly on that. Claire walked back inside. Richard waited. A moment later, she returned carrying a folder. She handed him Harbor House Living's income report. Every payment was listed. Every expense was documented. Every account had already been disclosed through Denise. No hidden cash, no secret transfers, no mystery companies. All of it is in discovery. Every dollar. Richard glanced at the first page. Then Claire looked directly at him. What about your company? He stopped moving. Claire did not mention the 2 development projects. She did not mention Vanessa's consulting fees. She did not mention the delayed commission. She did not need to. For the first time, Richard understood that Claire knew RMC Property Holdings was more than a condo. His confidence did not disappear. Men like Richard did not lose confidence all at once. But something in him cracked. He folded the report too sharply, handed it back, and told her she was making a mistake. Claire watched him leave. She did not feel triumphant. She felt clear. There was a difference. Richard still believed he could explain everything. In court, he would learn that one condo was not the problem. The problem was the structure he had built around it. At the hearing, Richard presented himself as reasonable. He wore a dark suit. He spoke calmly. He described Claire as emotional, defensive, and overly attached to the house. He said she was using a jointly owned property to create income while refusing him access. He said he had always wanted to become more involved in Emily's life. He described RMC Property Holdings as a normal business vehicle. The Lakeview condo, he said, was an investment. Vanessa, according to Richard, handled administrative tasks and nothing more. It was a polished story. That was Richard's strength. He knew how to make self-interest sound like responsibility. Denise did not call him cruel. She did not accuse him of destroying the family. She did not raise her voice. She opened the evidence one layer at a time. The first layer was custody. Denise presented Claire's parenting calendar, then Emily's school attendance records, medical appointments, dental visits, teacher emails, activity schedules, transportation records, Richard's work travel calendar. She showed the messages where he canceled weekends because of business. She showed the days Claire had handled emergencies alone. Then she showed the date when Richard's requests for equal parenting time suddenly increased. It was the same week his attorney received the first estimated child support calculation. Richard said he had changed. Denise did not argue with that. She simply asked why his proposed schedule still required Claire to handle school transportation, medical appointments, weekday routines, and most emergencies, while Richard received equal credit on paper. There was no dramatic moment. No judge slammed a hand on the bench. The documents did the work. The court did not remove Richard from Emily's life. Claire had never asked for that. But the judge found that an immediate 50-50 arrangement did not reflect the family's actual history. It also did not reflect Emily's established routine. Claire's home remained Emily's primary residence. Richard received a structured parenting schedule with clear responsibilities, no vague promises, no disappearing when work became inconvenient. The second layer was the DNA request. Denise entered the result without comment. Richard was Emily's biological father. Then she asked a simple question. Why had Richard waited 15 years to question paternity? Why did the concern appear only after child support became part of the case? Richard said he had always had doubts. Denise asked whether he had ever mentioned those doubts in an email, a text, a journal entry, a counseling session, or a previous legal document. He had not. The judge did not punish Richard for requesting the test. But timing has a way of revealing motive. The request weakened the story he was telling about wanting more responsibility. It suggested that responsibility interested him less once it came with a monthly amount attached. The third layer was income. The forensic accountant explained the delayed commission. The work had been completed during the marriage. The payment had simply been scheduled for after Richard expected the divorce to be finished. Then came the bonus, routed through RMC property holdings. The consulting payments to Vanessa. The financial interest in 2 development projects Richard had valued at almost nothing. And finally, the $70,000 debt to his mother. There was no signed loan agreement, no repayment history, no bank transfer showing she had ever loaned him the money, no record of interest, no record of demand. The debt existed only on Richard's disclosure form. Under examination, it disappeared. The court adjusted the income used for child support. It included the compensation Richard had tried to separate from his base salary. His real income did not look anything like the number he had first submitted. The fourth layer was the hidden property. RMC property holdings and the Lakeview condo became part of the marital asset analysis. Richard was asked why a home equity line secured by the family residence had funded a property Claire had never been told about. He called it an investment decision. Denise asked why Vanessa was the registered agent. Richard said it was convenient. Then Vanessa testified under subpoena. She looked less confident than Richard had. She confirmed she had stayed at the Lakeview condo before Richard formally separated from Claire. She also gave a different date for when their relationship began. Richard had placed it months later. That contradiction mattered. Not because the court needed details about their affair, not because anyone needed another humiliating story. It mattered because marital money had been moved while Richard was still telling Claire the marriage was intact. The fifth layer was Harbor House living. Richard claimed he was entitled to half the business. Denise did not make the careless argument that the company could never be considered in property division. Instead, she showed the court what Claire had actually done. Claire had disclosed every dollar. She had preserved the property. She had paid expenses that otherwise might have gone unpaid. She had used her own labor. She had kept records. She had signed legal leases. She had maintained insurance. She had prevented the house from moving closer to foreclosure. Richard had left the property. He had called it a burden. Claire had turned that burden into stability. The final orders did not give Claire everything. Real cases rarely end that cleanly. But the hidden assets were added back into the marital estate. Richard was ordered to reimburse a portion of the marital funds used for the condo and affair-related expenses. Child support was calculated from his adjusted income, not the reduced figure he had first reported. Claire was allowed to remain in the house, while Emily was still a minor. The order also created a structured path for Claire to buy out Richard's remaining equity later. Richard was ordered to cover part of Claire's attorney fees because his incomplete discovery had increased the cost of the case. His request for equal custody, made without a history of equal care, did not succeed. The consequences continued outside the courtroom. The condo had to be sold. Vanessa left the company after the litigation exposed her financial role. Richard's promotion was delayed while his employer reviewed business expenses connected to their relationship. He did not lose everything. That would have been too simple. He lost the version of reality in which every number could be controlled by whoever spoke with the most confidence. Claire walked out of court without smiling. She carried the folder, her keys, and a parenting schedule that protected Emily's routine. Richard had once believed confidence would outweigh documentation. The court believed the records. 18 months later. Harbor House living no longer felt like something Claire had built out of panic. It had become a real business, profitable, fully booked, stable enough to breathe inside. Claire followed the settlement exactly. She bought out Richard's remaining equity in the house. She paid off the home equity debt he had used without telling her. She renovated 2 additional rooms, but only after securing the permits and documenting every expense. By then, 3 local medical providers were sending contract nurses and temporary specialists her way. The waiting list stayed full. Claire also began offering bookkeeping services to other owners who rented furnished homes to long-term guests. That side of the business grew more quickly than she expected. She understood their problems because she had lived them. Cash flow, repairs, taxes, deposits. The 1,000 small details that decide whether a business survives after the excitement wears off. Harbor House did not become an overnight empire. Claire did not wake up famous. She did not buy a mansion or start giving interviews. She built something better. A business that paid its bills. A home that supported itself. An income she could rely on. By the end of the year, Claire was earning more than Richard had once claimed she was capable of earning alone. Not enough to impress strangers. Enough to become free. The mortgage stayed current. The business accounts were healthy. Every room had a purpose. And for the first time in decades, every contract carried Claire's signature without Richard's name beside it. Emily changed too. At first, she followed the court schedule. She went to Richard's apartment on assigned weekends. She sat through quiet dinners and long explanations about how the lawyers had turned everything against him. Richard blamed the court. He blamed Vanessa. He blamed Claire. He blamed money. What he never did was take responsibility. Emily tried to be polite. She tried to keep the peace. Then one evening, Richard asked why she had helped Claire keep records. He wanted to know what she had told the lawyer. He wanted to know whether she had been taking notes for her mother. Something in Emily closed after that. She came home and told Claire she no longer wanted to visit him. Claire did not smile. She did not treat it like a victory. She knew what it meant for a daughter to lose trust in her father. So she called Denise. They followed the legal process. Emily was old enough for her wishes to carry weight. The court reviewed the missed visits, the counseling recommendation, and Richard's attempts to pull her into the financial dispute. The schedule was modified. Richard was still allowed to contact his daughter. Emily simply stopped answering. She did not block him out of anger. She stopped responding because every conversation left her feeling used. When Claire asked whether she hated him, Emily shook her head. I don't hate him. I just don't trust him anymore. That hurt Richard more than the sale of the condo, more than the attorney fees, more than the child support order. Claire never encouraged a distance. She never spoke badly about him in front of Emily. She simply protected her daughter's right to stop carrying the weight of choices she had never made. Richard sent Claire one final email. He said they could have built Harbor House together if she had not turned their private problems into a legal war. Claire read it once. Then she waited a week. Her reply was one sentence. We once had a house. You saw a burden. I saw a place to begin again. She sent it. Then she deleted the thread. By the second anniversary of the divorce, Claire had expanded Harbor House into a second property. She hired 2 employees. Linda handled room preparation and guest arrivals several days a week. A part-time administrator helped with scheduling, invoices, and hospital referrals. Emily began helping with the website and welcome materials while preparing for college. The old house was no longer quiet. There were voices in the kitchen, suitcases in the hallway, fresh sheets folded on the dining table, paid invoices on Claire's desk. There were women arriving, tired and uncertain, then leaving stronger than they had come. And there was Claire, standing in the middle of it all, no longer asking permission to build a future. Richard thought he had left her with an empty house. What he really left behind was the one asset he had never understood. Claire herself. Winning after betrayal is not always watching the other person collapse. Sometimes it is becoming so steady, so capable, and so free that their absence no longer feels like a loss. If this story reminded you that silence can become strategy, subscribe for more stories about betrayal, divorce, custody battles, and the quiet moment people take their power back. And tell us what you think. Did Claire win when she built a successful business? Or did she win when Emily finally understood which parent had protected her all along?